Hello everyone and welcome to Double Bits Workshop. So in today's episode we will be hanging an axe, and I'm going to be going for just kind of a more, if you haven't hung an axe before or if it's been a minute, just kind of a refresher for you. I'm going to kind of go over it a little bit in process but not too crazy about it. And if you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. Helps me out greatly. So if you are new to the channel as well and didn't see last week's video, no problem there. So I had a little bit of a mishap, kind of ended up breaking a handle on an axe, which is kind of why you're here. You might have actually had an axe head handed to you, given to you, found at a yard sale, or you yourself have broken an axe handle and had the axe head left over. So we're going to kind of go over that real quick and just kind of an idea of what's going on with that. For everyone else that may have seen kind of what happened last week, I said I wouldn't fall off the horse, try to get back on, all that good stuff. Well, I gave myself a week because a lot of other things just kind of came up with our dogs, and I decided to jump into a couple other projects because of that, just to kind of get my mind off of it, and the video sadly kind of slipped through the cracks, so we're going to be revisiting that today. I still have some work to do, so I need an axe for that, just something that I can not be too concerned with, kind of just chopping some different wood that I have. I have a massive pile of wood in my backyard, and I need to get rid of it. I have different show pieces like this that I like a lot, but I will say that there have been some new techniques that I've learned, so the hanging of that axe, as much as I enjoyed it, I made my wedge too small. I'll say that right out the gate. So, what we'll be using today is a basic store-bought handle. This is something that's been knocked around with me forever. I bought this years and years ago, I think roughly now 12 to 13 years ago, and I think this is hickory if I remember right. And I got it at a yard sale for like 50 cents. I never ended up using it because the shoulder here for the eye that will go into your axe head was too small for every other axe head that I had found. So this handle just kind of got left to the side so I wouldn't have this huge gap in it. Or it's also indexed for a single bearded axe, not a double beard or a double bit axe. And I didn't have a purpose for it for a while. Well, lo and behold, when I found this axe handle, I was digging through the old box of axe heads that I have underneath my bench here, and I found this guy. Not sure exactly what it is. If you know, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm also going to be doing some sanding, so we'll see if I see any marks on this. But it was just a $1 axe head. A little bit on the lighter side, probably more of like a youth size, not a larger headed axe. So it won't tire you out as quick, but you need to put a little bit more effort into it to make the cuts you need. Also, I'm going to be making my own wedge material. So this will be the main thing I'm actually making out of this build. This is ash. A lot of people also have been using this lately for axe handles. It's really good at shock absorption, just for the type of wood type it is. And I'll be using that for the wedge to go and actually open up into the eye. I had a miscellaneous pile of steel axe wedges. So what you're going to do is mount the head onto the handle, and then you use a wedge to spread that out. And then to keep that from moving, you use one of these little steel wedges at an angle. You can also do it just flat, depending on preference at that point. But you want to split that wood and cause it to also open up a little bit extra in a different direction to kind of give you a full-on wedge that holds that head onto the handle. Basic premise to making an axe stay in place. So there's 3 different sizes I have here that you can work with. So you have your larger kind of big boy wedges here, and these ones you'd use on a larger axe, double bit, or just something that's got a large eye on it. You have your medium size, which is a little bit smaller, same premise. It's a V, and you have little slots on it that allow it to penetrate, but then kind of hold itself against the wood grain once it's in there. So another nice little principle of these. You can also get them flat, personal preference, again, just depends on what you want to work with. And you can also make these as well if you just have some kind of angle grinder and just some flat bar steel. It's preference. You also have your smaller wedges. These ones are going to be a little bit more around like a quarter of an inch widthwise on them, and they are roughly around 1/8 inch at the thickest point, depending on size. These ones are more meant for your hatchet style, so if you do find these in the store, that's more what these are for as well. A few people also have a preference, depending on your style or which one you trust a little bit more, to use two of the little guys on the axe. Now that also kind of gives a look, so certain people actually like that look. I'm not sure, I haven't tried it to know if it does a little bit better for longevity of an axe. You can also let me know in the comments on that one as well if you have personal preference or something that you have tried and true know one way or the other. For me, the things I've hung before and the things that have worked good for me is a medium wedge and just a single one in the dead center. So you get all the spreading coming out from the dead center of the actual V right here. It's going to spread outward from the wooden wedge, and then I'll also turn it and put in the steel wedge at an angle to cause an effect to have it bulge out sideways. So that way it indexes and stays on there from multiple directions. Alright, so first step in the process, once you have your handle selected that will match up to the eye of your axe head, this is known as the eye, is depending on the handle that you get, how nicely it fits, you're going to want to shave a bit of this off just to where it fits snugly, not so much so that you absolutely have to hammer it into the head. You want to make sure that it's a nice snug fit, so you will have to do a little bit of kind of persuading to get it in there, but you don't want to absolutely wail on it to where you split your handle. So we're going to sand this down a little bit, pop that into the head, and then I'm going to cut my wedge to the size that I need. So this material type is going to be the right width that I need to go along the perforated crack or the cut that was put into the handle from the factory. And I'm going to wedge that in, and then I'm going to cut it flush, and I'm also going to take one of these steel wedges and hammer it in as well. So on to some sanding, and then I'm also going to clean up the axe head, mount it on top, and we'll go from there. Alrighty, so far what I've done is I've just sanded down that shoulder, and the natural shape of this is close, but it will still be just slightly off from the eye of the axe. You can kind of see there a bit. But fits pretty darn snug on the bottom here, and the top is actually mushroomed out. So on your axe head, it's actually designed on the inside here of the eye that the bottom is going to be smaller than the top, so that way when you hammer the wedge in, it has room to move and hold the steel down. So if this seems a little bit more than what you were expecting from the bottom, do not worry, but also make sure not to take the head, put it on upside down, because what you're going to have there is a really large opening, and then it is a really small one on top, so it'll be a little bit harder to actually wedge it in appropriately. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now with the head, I didn't go absolutely chrome. I wanted to leave a little bit of grunge so that way it felt used, but it looks like something that you'd see out of kind of a horror movie almost. I kind of like that aesthetic. Something kind of found, but still definitely good to be used, and kind of scary-ish looking. And I don't know, I just like the mirror effect, but I didn't want to go absolutely chrome 100% through. I kind of just like that. but it is still meant to be used. It is a tool. So now what you're going to want to do is turn this up, get a couple taps on the end and here. Yeah. On your handle, mine's a little bit more angled up, but you're going to want to hit right here, drive that in slightly, and then from there, there's a little trick I'll show you. Once you have the axe started, you can actually let it hover, and then just keep tapping right on that top spot there. And what you'll start to notice is that the axe head itself is climbing up on the shoulder right here. And what you're going to start getting, here if you can see it, is little wood shavings beginning. So what you're going to want to do is kind of correct a little bit. Sometimes your strikes will actually create the handle to go off center. So kind of keep an eye on that, because you don't want this to cut on the side that you're actually wanting to stay straight and then have the other side kind of like give and go the easier path. What you can do is just set the axe head down, give it a couple taps, and that'll give you the ability to keep going with it. So I'll keep tapping on this a little bit, bring it up just slightly. And what I can use now is a little chisel or a pocket knife, whatever you have readily available. And when you start to see these little shavings begin, you're going to take that and just kind of shave it away slightly. You don't want to go super crazy on it, but you're just giving it a little room to breathe and making those micro adjustments that are more than needed at the beginning, unless you're just so happen to get it perfectly. And what that does is it gives it room for it to move up the handle now. I like doing the hovering technique because then as your driving force is pushing that down, it's not getting an influence to where if I'm leaning too far on the blade or too far back on the hammering side of the actual axe, which most of these you're not actually supposed to hammer on the back. This is going to be your soft steel, and this is going to be your more hardened steel, so that way this can kind of absorb that shock and kind of get a little bit of movement out of it. As you can see there, we're making progress for sure. Climbing up, I'm not getting too much, a little bit here and there. Alrighty, so I have taken the axe and mounted it by hammering a little bit more on the end here. Sadly, I have a little bit of mushrooming on the end of the axe, so I'll probably end up just shaving this off and kind of stabilizing it with some glue just to keep it from expanding and cracking down any further. But that was what happens when I was just having to mount the handle in. I was being a little bit more aggressive just to kind of get it on there, but all I've done so far is just kind of clean these little chips. So you can kind of see here. You'll get little chips along the way as you're mounting the head onto the handle. All you got to do is just kind of clean them off with a pocket knife or a chisel, whatever you have readily available. And the main reason you clean these off is just so that way none of those chips can continue and start a crack along as you're using it, and getting all that force getting moved through here. If you have a little splinter up, it could start to cause destabilizing and start cracking due to that. Alright, so now that this is mounted up, just kind of flush on top here. As you can see, I kind of used a tool to knock this back out, clean it up a little bit more, and then mount it back in. Did that off camera. Kind of caused a little bit of depressions here, but that's alright. Now what I'm going to do, since this is pretty much set where it needs to be, is I'm going to make my wedge material. Now, this is the same piece that I used to make my wedge last time, so same kind of principle, same thing. I'm just creating an angle on here, so that way it acts as a proper wedge. Real thin in the bottom, a little bit larger on top. So what I want is how much I want this eye to expand out here, just a little bit more than that. So as you can see, it's kind of loose here, even though it's nice and tight all the way around here. So that's because the eye opens up on the top. So your wedge is supposed to take up the space plus a little extra and kind of compress all the wood fibers to either side of the wedge. So that way you're taking up a little extra space than you're supposed to, and it properly wedges it all nice and tight there. So approximately, I'll go for something a little bit bigger, and you can mount it either perfectly flush, or in this case I'm making it even a little bit bigger than I should so I can get it absolutely as tight as possible and then trim off the excess, giving me the best chance at the best fit. There we go. So I'm going to mount this in the vise real quick and just use a handsaw, make a quick cut on that. You can run it through alternatively through a bandsaw like I have, or if you have one as well. I just enjoy the precision you get from a Japanese pole saw, because as you pull, it aligns the blade nice and tight and I have full control over it, and there's less chance or potential of issues. And also my bandsaw blade's getting a little dull and I need to order a new one. So all that to say, let's make a cut. So I have cut out my wedge. One of the little tricks you can do on here is you can just take same kind of thing like a pocket knife, and what you want to do is just cut and chamfer these edges in slightly. The reason being for that is as you're hammering downward, if one of these little fibers right here grabs, it'll split up the wedge. So what you want to do is just kind of clean up any little rough edges from your wedge, or even if you purchase a store-bought wedge, just still kind of chamfer those edges a little bit. It gives you a little bit more of something to kind of guide in. It's not going to harm or defeat any of the strength of the wedge, but it gives you a better chance of this actually mounting in properly. And what you want to do is make sure your wedge fills out the whole eye. I made mine just slightly bigger on the top because I'm not going to get all of this in there. At least that's what I'm planning on, because of where the cut is on here is just a little bit above. So this should hopefully stop just before then, nice enough to where I have a little bit of something to cut and make it nice and flush on top. Just judging from how it's kind of set in there, I'll have just a little bit hanging out the top. Alright, so just some knowledge that I've picked up along the way, you could say. As I said a moment ago, you can kind of cut these little corners in here a bit, but another little trick is to chamfer your edges of your wedge. Not only will that allow it to go in a little bit smoother, but also what you want to kind of play with is dependent on how your handle and eye are set up. So as you can see with this store-bought handle, my original line or cut is off a bit. So what I kind of did is I overcut this side a little bit, so as it goes in, it'll follow the curve on the side here. Now I might still need to tweak the wedge a little bit as I'm hammering it, so I'll take a few looks at it and use my pocket knife to trim off excess, but this just kind of guides me in the right direction. A lot of wedges that you'll either purchase or you'll create will have more of a 90-degree corners and everything from your cuts, so you're going to want to kind of play with that a bit. And the wedge will be slightly oversized is what they choose to do just to give you something to work with. You want it to fit pretty much exact for where it is on the head. So as you can see, I've kind of filed and cut this one down so that way it fits within the eye. So even if I was to get 100% of this into the axe head, which I don't plan to because I cut this a little bit long, so where my line is right about here. It leaves me just a little bit of overhang. So that way I can trim this nice and flush, and that's just more for a look and a preference. And that way I know for a fact as much as I can get of this will go into the handle to help cause that expansion we need. So I'm going to use some wood glue on the actual wedge itself. So we're going to glue wood to wood. We don't want to glue the axe head onto the handle at all. That will actually cause a few different little issues and cause potential cracks down the road, because let's say there's one vein of glue that's solidly stuck to the axe for quite a while, and eventually the other parts break loose. Well, that one now has a strong connection to a few fibers and may cause a crack as you use the axe. And that could be a year, it could be a couple years down the road, but eventually it can sometimes cause a lot more issues than you want it to. Plus, having the natural movement of the axe head on the handle to some extent can actually help with the shock absorption, as well as a few other key benefits, just as the life of the axe continues. And of course, when we hang an axe, we want it to last, longer than 2 days. I've been told that kind of helps a little. So I'm going to glue this wedge up just on the inside here and a little bit on the bottom, so as I drive this in, that glue will get pushed up and around the wedge. I don't need to absolutely submerge the wedge in wood glue. And I had made a few cuts on the end here, so that way I had a flat profile to work with to hammer on. So I just cut the top so that this is level with the head on both ends, so that as I hammer downward, I'm getting the best force and push directly down into the head. I trimmed off the piece in the back that was starting to kind of split and splay, so this is all now nice and smooth, no cracks or anything. And I chamfered all of these edges, because as I hammer on this end here, if I don't chamfer these edges, that will cause more splitting. So the better chamfer that you have on the top gives you a lot more ability for all the force that you're putting into the wood to get dispersed straight rather than going to the weakest points. So you're just kind of buffing this a bit, so that way all that force you're putting into it goes down and doesn't have a chance for it to split and splay. There's a couple of good videos where some individuals have actually taken 2x4s and a sledgehammer and tried different chamfering techniques on it, and they said that even just the slightest amount of a chamfer, when you hit solidly with a sledgehammer for maximum force on a 2x4 driving it into the ground, they said just a normal 2x4 with a 90-degree cut will splay within like 1 to 2 whacks. But on the one that they chamfer the edges on it, they were able to get 9 to 10 whacks on it before it even showed any signs of cracking. So in that logic, I feel more and more solid with this idea. And it also makes it just a nicer kind of cupping and feeling on the end of your axe handle. So let's mount the wedge in. Alright, so what you might have noticed in the time lapse, sadly, is two things happened. One, the hammering was going alright, and then my stepping stone split. And where it split actually caused a little bit of a jog in my wedge, so it started to crack. So I just kind of quickly sat it up, tapped it over, got it down as close as I could, and I got the wedge to about here-ish. And as I was trying to get those last few hits to get it as close as I could, the wedge sadly split. Alright, so you can see here, sadly, we had the wedge split down a little bit into the top here. It's not all lost. I still have a generous portion of the wedge in the top here, and I had gotten it pretty close before it broke. So it's strong, it's just sadly not going to look as good as I was hoping for. So I'm going to do a little bit of sanding, get that as smooth as I can, and then I'm going to throw in a wedge in the top here. Alrighty, let's try this again. Need to get this all split up, so hopefully this little guy will do the trick for me. I think so far so good. Whew. Alright, we have ourselves a raging success. I absolutely love this axe so far. It is a 2.5 pound head. I found that out after I was doing my sanding. It's on the back of the underneath right here of the head, and it just works so well. This is, of course, just a classic style handle, store-bought. I scraped off all their kind of like junky veneer that I just don't like. It doesn't feel good in the hand. I feel it almost causes blisters more. And I used a kind of a higher ratio. I think it's either a 40-60 or 50-50 is what a friend made for me. This little guy here, which is beeswax and mineral oil. And this stuff, he calls it, what was it, wood butter. And my gosh, this stuff I love. So I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I am happy I put the leather piece on, because as you can see, even though the axe sunk in nice and deep, the edge of the wood was just a little bit back. So even though this is doing its splitting action, the wood hit the handle pretty rough, but the leather took the brunt of it. So even though it kind of messed it up a little bit, I'm actually happy to see that. It makes me feel a little less kind of gun shy to use this axe. This is going to be used. This is a tool, and I'm going to use it to the utmost of its capability. So this will split the rest of that pile that you saw. I just kind of went at a couple logs real quick just to kind of whittle it down and show you that she's working good. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, be sure and like and subscribe. Helps me out greatly. If you want to get notifications each and every time I upload a video, make sure and hit that notification bell. It helps give you notifications each and every time I upload. So thank you all so very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. This turned out amazingly well. I'm super stoked, and I'm excited to stop filming and continue using it. So let me know in the comments what you think below. Sorry again for that little lapse in time. I'll try to stay on a regular schedule of once a week at least, pumping out content here. I got a couple more upcoming projects I'm excited about. We're going to be redoing the shed a bit here, or workshop, because it kind of fell into disarray. You can kind of see in the corners and stuff that it's a little messy, and I need to get back on top of it. And I have a few things that I'm going to 3D print for organization on the walls and try to get everything at arm's reach rather than having to dig and dive through piles of wood and scraps and other tools to find the one tool you need, because that's just destroying my workflow horribly. So that's going to be the next task at hand. Now that I'm getting everything kind of organized, and I'm going to tear everything out and rebuild and move around a few things, as far as all the excess lumber and materials, as far as my tools too. I'm going to take all those out and kind of rethink a few of the things, maybe tear those out that have been organizing stuff, because it just needs a redo, and we need something fresh in here. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all so very much for watching, and have yourself a wonderful day.